Hi everyone, how are you doing? My name is Aurelia Munene, as most of you know. I'm recording this for the Journal Club thematic group on publishing your research. And I didn't want to this week to go without us having an activity. Last time, I spoke about why publishing is important, and I put the slide on our page there. I'd love to hear your views on this, and I want our group to be a very participatory group. I'm not a lecturer. I wish to be a peer in the group. So I kindly ask you to really participate, ask questions, share resources. That's the way you learn best. So feel free to be very engaged. So today I thought I'll just do a bit of a session on how I came to carve out a piece of my research and publish. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I did, how it began, and then I'm hoping that then this week, the assignment for us will be, for those who already have study findings, who've already completed their research, then now the work will be, can you go back to your research paper, start reading through it. I know some of you maybe have not read through it for a while. Read through it and identify at least an area that you wish to publish on. And then on Friday, sorry, we are going to discuss that, because on Friday we are going to look at how do you look for a journal. Because as I said last time, once you've identified the area with which you want to publish on, before you start writing, you need to identify a journal so that the journal will be able to guide you on what is needed. And I'll show you the journal that I published in one of them and what they had asked for and how it was important for me to read that before I start writing. So let's get started. I'm going to share screen. So let me start with my research thesis. So I have a master's in development studies. I think you can see that. So I have a master's in development studies. I did it at The Hague. It was a good school because we did a lot of work in terms of, it was a very good school in terms of grounding us very well in research. Let me just share again to be very sure. So I learned a lot from that particular institution. So this is my research. I loved my topic, and that's the other thing you have to really be careful about. First of all, it's very important that you do research in an area that you have interest in, because that will keep you motivated. I was really interested in early childhood issues, and I wanted to really tell the story of the children growing up in urban poor slums. And a lot had been written about them. But as we always say in research, you need to find out an area in which you can contribute in that body of knowledge. So I read a lot of articles about early childhood in the urban poor slums. And then I started seeing what was not spoken about, some of the assumptions some of these studies are, and that is where I concentrated my research on. Okay, so that's what you should always do. Once you identify, I'm concerned about children. And for me, my concern was, why are children in the slums still dying? Yet we have a lot of people who are working there. Why do they keep dying, especially children 0 to 3? Because I had read a lot in literature, they kept talking about 0 to 5. But when I look at the children who die, most of them die actually before their 3rd birthday. So I decided a lot has been done about 0 to 5, but let me concentrate on 0 to 3. And 0, I meant from conception. So this also included pregnancy, okay? So this is what troubled me in my research. And once I read, I found a gap in knowledge and I thought, let me contribute to this knowledge. So my topic was a troubling start. Troubling meaning they start in a troubled way, ex- exposing processes of exclusion for children aged 0 to 3 years in urban poor locales of Kenya. So in my study, I made the claim that children in urban poor spaces are starting their lives very badly. They are likely to die, they are likely to start their lives badly because there are processes that are happening there that are actively excluding them. So my study was to show which are these processes. There were structural processes, there were institutional processes, there are also processes related to agency and voice. So that is what my paper sought to contribute. So I'll just go quickly to my objectives so that you can see my objectives, and then you'll be able to see what I carved out in terms of presentation. So all this was me now giving a background and then sort of giving the relevance and justification of the study, which is very important. And this was now my study objective. So my objective was to understand how children in urban poor locales, and I was specific on Mukuru kwa Ruben, how do they realize their right to health? And I explored issues of structural issues, institutional issues, looking at how as the state, what are the state policies say about children health? What do they assume about children, especially the state normally assumes that all children are the same. They do not remember that children who are living in the slum have particular issues that they face just because they live there that need to be considered in policy. But policy treats all children as the same. So I wanted to contribute to that policy discussion by saying, look, these children are not the same. There are many processes that are excluding them from their right to health, and we have to look at them. So my main research question was, how do structural, institutional, and agentive process, agentive means agency, use of voice, processes affect the responsiveness of care spaces for children aged 0 to 3? So how do these processes affect the care spaces? And for care spaces, I meant, how do they affect how children taken care of at home, how children are taken care of in the hospital, how children are also framed in policy. So those were the care spaces I was looking at: home, hospital, and the policy, and the community. So those are the places I saw are important for these children, and let us look at the processes that are excluding them. So I had 3 questions that I wanted to answer, 3 sub-questions. One, how do we come about to determine the needs of children 0 to 3? How does Kenya determine 0 to 3, this is what children need? And those of you who are in healthcare, you will realize that the government has outlined almost 8 or 9 things that a child who is 0 to 3 needs. They need their vaccination, their growth monitoring. There is also women education and all that. So how did Kenya come to say these are the needs of children? And is that definition enough, especially when you look at a child who is growing in a slum? Is that all they need? Then the other question was, how do intra and inter-household care experiences influence interaction within the healthcare scheme? Now, intra means caregiving experiences in the house. How do caregiving experience in the house affect what happens in the hospital? The way mothers behave, the way fathers behave in the house, how does the care they give, how does it influence how they interact with the care in the hospital? Inter means between houses, because what I realize in a place like the slum, they really depend on each other to take care of children. So it's very important. The inter-household relations are important because, as most of you may know, persons, especially women who work in the slums, most of them provide labor for the sort of the middle class in Nairobi, but they have children. So who do they leave their children with? They leave them maybe at a daycare, maybe with a neighbor. So I also wanted to understand, what do these inter-household caring, how does it also affect the interaction with the hospital? Because I found those three spaces very important for child growth. Then finally, how do the healthcare givers now at the hospital interact with the home, and how does that shape the well-being of children? So as you can see, my questions are moving systematically. How do we come to determine the needs? How is the caregiving at home and in the community? And how is the caregiving at the hospital? And how does this affect the well-being of the child? So I believed by answering those questions, I would then be able to tell the story of, these are the processes that are excluding children. And if we don't look at these processes, these children will continue dying and starting in a very troubled way. Okay, so I had my methodology. I did my methodology very well. My sampling, I did qualitative only. In my school, you could do qualitative, and that would be sufficient. I used mainly interviews, in-depth interviews, participant observation, because I actually went and worked in the hospital, and I had focus group discussion. So that's all about the first chapter. And then now I had my three conceptual lenses. One was social exclusion. Remember, I was studying exclusion, so I had to go into that. I also had a concept, because for us, we could use concepts or theories, but for me, I preferred to combine different concepts that allow me to tell this story. So I also had the concept of, because children needs are treated as, the way Kenya determines the need of children, I was very concerned. How did they come to determine it? And then when I read the history of primary healthcare in Kenya, I read and found out it was a very political process. And those needs that the children were selected for, I think there were 7 or 8, it was through a political process. Not in Kenya, it happened abroad. And so I wanted to show that these needs of children are political. How we determine the needs of children is political. So we have to see what are the politics behind that, and what is the interest, and what does that mean then when our policies are sort of blindly just adopting things without looking at the different types of children. So that's why I crafted the concept of, we need to repoliticize how global child needs are interpreted. Then the last concept was care. I wanted to understand, what is care? How is care conceptualized at the household, inter-household, intra-household, and at the hospital? So those were my concepts. I combined them. And remember, theories or concepts are very important because they frame our paper. If you look very keenly, all those three concepts, social exclusion, political, repoliticizing children needs, and care, all of them, you're going to see them in my 3 questions, okay? So I find some people, when they choose theories or concepts, you do not see them anywhere. They just are somewhere stuck, but they have to be woven in your questions. They have to be woven in your problem statement. And then they're the same ones that are going to help you in your analysis. So they are not just there for to tick a box that I have a theory. They are woven from the beginning, even how you come to conceptualize a problem. Sometimes it's through a particular theory. So it's very important to have that in mind. And so I collected data, and these are some of the findings. One of the findings was, I was exposing the politics of child needs. So I read a lot about, you see here is where I tell you the needs that were identified, the GOBI FFF. So I looked at the history, and I think this is very important. Sorry, my eyes are a bit itchy. This is very important because most people, I find, they don't go back to history. I don't think you can be a very good researcher if you never go back to history and understand what is the history of my concept? What is the history of my theory? If I'm using the word sustainable development, I want to know, where did this word come from? Where did that word come from? If I'm going to use the word like primary healthcare or selective primary healthcare, I have to go back to history and understand what were the debates at that time. What were those who are pushing that concept? What was their interest? What was their, who was contesting? Because that is very important. Otherwise, what will happen, you will do your research in a very light way, and someone reading it will be like, but Connie, this person doesn't understand the debates. So if you're a researcher worth your salt, always go back, trace the history of your concepts. Even the word IMCI is used a lot in the hospitals. I had to go and see, where did this word come from? So that was one of my findings. I wrote a lot about how political the process of determining children needs is. Remember, that was my first sub-question. Then the other sub-question was, I wanted to understand inter and intra-household care interaction. So I was looking at how are children constructed in Mukuru. And then I wrote a lot about how do people leverage on community to bring up children, because how are male bodies, because men are always told they don't help mothers, they don't do, but how are they occupying the caring space for children? Okay. And then I had, yes, then conclusions. Then the last one was about now looking at processes in the hospital. Now in the hospital, what is happening? I found very overworked care staff. I found staff, because of their relying a lot on their scientific knowledge, they dismiss mothers' knowledges. And so I found there's a lot of power imbalance in the hospital, where you find mothers just sit, they don't want to say anything because they don't want to be shouted at, and the staff are very overworked. So when I did participant observation, I was very keen to look at interaction. So then and as you can see, my titles are not, my mentor always encouraged us, when you write titles, themes, write interesting things, interesting sub-themes, not just factors, you see like this one, rules that define entry and exit. That was a theme I got in my data. Interest in labeling as a discursive practice. How are labels used on mothers? When I asked healthcare mothers, healthcare nurses and doctors, what they say about the mothers, you see, these are just illiterate people. They don't even listen. And so I caught that, and I pulled out the theme of labels. How do labels come about, and how can labels be exclusionary? Okay, so all that. Then finally, I had my conclusion. So this was my master's thesis. I did well. I got 87. I got a merit. That was good. It was very hard to write because this was my first research paper. When I went to UON, we were not writing a lot, but I really grew. Between those 9 months of doing this paper, oh my gosh, I grew in so many ways. So this was my paper. Then now, after some time, my supervisor told us, got an opportunity to publish on this journal. Okay, so let me just show you the journal. So let me stop share. Let me stop share so that you can see the journal. So this was the journal. So she told me, hey, Aurelia, I think we've found a journal which you could publish some of your work. And it was actually a childhood journal with a bit of focus, with a focus on education. But she told me, you are talking about child health, but remember, children start learning from birth, okay? So even if you did not talk directly about education, you can bring out the idea of parents as a concept called educarers. They are educators of their children at 0 to 3, and they're also caregivers. So with that, this journal became relevant. You see, because sometimes you could be having a paper which is not your feeling, it is addressing the issue, but the journal has a very specific target. And she didn't want to waste this opportunity. We waste this opportunity. So once she told me there's a concept like educarers that you can use to make a case for yourself why your research suits this particular journal, then I was like, okay, we can go and write. So this is typically how a journal looks like, a good journal. This is a peer-reviewed journal. It's a South African journal, and it gives you all the journal information. And you can see they're even saying they're peer-reviewed, and they talk about children birth to 12. So you see my paper was sitting right there. And the journal is relevant for who, they tell you who it's relevant for. And they also talk about the type of studies, statistical research on children learning and development. Remember, even if my study was a bit on health, it's also about children development, 0 to 3. So I was like, okay, I think it's relevant. So this is the topics they like to talk about. You can write on numeracy, you can write on children development, you can write on language and literacy, issues of child play and child design thinking, care and education, teacher education. So mine felt more comfortable in care. Remember, care was a concept that I was using. And you see, they need articles to be in English. Full article should be in English, and it is peer reviewed. So I just want to show you the submission guidelines. Why I told you it's very important. Once you now get something you want to publish from your paper, you quickly go and start looking for journals so that then you're guided and you can see if they are well matched for your publication. So this is now how guidelines come. This is the type of articles, preparing a manuscript, other relevant information about the journal. You need a cover letter, okay, you see. And then with all these required forms, they have all these forms. I'll open them. Let me just read through. They also need original research article that provides innovative research. You can see they give you the word limit as an abstract, references 60 or less. You see those, so you see you have to read. You have to really read so that you can have a very powerful paper. Then tables for those who have done the surveys, ethical statement. And for my study, my master's thesis, I had gotten permission at the Nakotsi, I had gotten county permission. So when it came to publishing, I was not worried because this is a study that was approved. So that's why it's very good to get ethics for your study. Then the structure of the review. No, this, if you're writing a review article, this is for original. So there are different types of publication. There's original research. Mine was under original research. It can be a review article where you're just giving perspective of a field. Maybe you're doing a secondary analysis. It can be editorial, but that is mainly for experts. It can be an essay, a correspondence, a book review or corrections, original article, full structure. So this is just to show that they even tell you to show you what type of publications they have. And you can see now when it comes to a cover letter, they tell you how to write it. They tell you what is the outline of the research article. You need a title, an abstract, a background. You see, that's why it's good to first, once you've identified the area, then quickly go and see what the article tells you, because you don't want to start writing, then you have to start repeating. You see, it makes it very clear for you what to put in the introduction, research method, the results, the conclusions, all that. Okay. So if you're writing an original, this is how you do it. If you're writing a review, so it gives you the entire structure. And a good journal, which is real, will always show you who is the editorial team. And it's prudent to sometimes go Google, this Elizabeth Henning, is she what she is? You know, go Google on, and you'll find that comes in. Hasina Ibrahim, I know her. She's an amazing early childhood researcher. She has mentored me. So this one, you see, very clear on who are in the editorial team. So this is a good journal. And you see, they've put authors, a lot on authors and articles. So it's always good to check articles of a particular publication so that you can be able to see what type of publications do they like, okay? What type of publications do they like? So that, and how do people write, okay? So that even you now, you have to align to that if you want your work to be published. So you can see many people have published with this journal because it is a strong journal, it is a good journal. And you can see my paper is here. You see, Aurelia Munene, the paper that I published in 2016. Let me just click on it. And this was the paper. It was, you see, categories original research. The title was Interrogating the Artificial Divide in Health and Education. Yes. So let me just show you how that paper was. I think the PDF is here. So this was the paper. I think, let me stop sharing and open the real paper nicely. So you see, that was the paper. And it took a lot to write it because it was my first publication ever. And I had a lot of self-doubt, but I got a lot of support from my supervisor. So this is the article we wrote in 2016. And you see the abstract, we just followed exactly what they told us. Now, remember, I told you this is from my major research. Why I started showing you my MA research, master's research, was because I wanted to see how I carved out. So I told you this journal is about education, and I chose the category of care and development, and I brought in the education angle. How? By saying that my topic is, I want to interrogate the artificial divide between health and education for children 0 to 3 years. What do I mean? I wanted to see, because I noticed that people separate health and education in children. But 0 to 3, it's together. Health of a child, how they are learning to speak, all the things they are learning is experienced by the same child. So I wanted to make a claim that artificial divide we create there really is really very, what happens is that it ends up excluding children, ends up making children who are 0 to 3 very invisible, because they are only visible when they start schooling. Yet, when they were 0 to 3, they were learning, they were growing, and they were developing. So that was my argument. So what am I saying here? When you decide to publish a paper from your big thesis, you're going to look for an area of entry. Maybe, for instance, this one was more on my question 1 and 2. The one I was talking about health needs, and the one I was talking about intra-family relations with the hospital. That's the area which most of the content here was derived from. So once you've identified, I want to maybe to publish objective 1 or objective 2 or a particular finding, then now you have to come and create a full paper. you have to create a full paper because you're not going to copy paste your master's to come and put on a publication. First of all, some of these publications are your master's could already have been published as an unpublished in the archives of your university, so it can come up. But also remember, because you're picking only a part of your research, it means if you copy paste, there's not going to be flow. And you can see for journals like this, they only need 5,000 words. So you remember that you have to read again, new literature, you have to ask a question, objectives, and all that. So let's see how we did it. So I started talking about a new topic. Now because you're not going to use the topic of your master's because you're not writing about that whole topic. So you'll need a new title. So this was my title, which means that everything I write must speak to this, okay? So you have to be ready to do the work of reading again, recrafting a new paper, and remember you have some findings that also is speaking to those findings that you have. So this was the paper that we wrote, and let me just show you the structure. You see, I talked about contextualizing urban poor locales. I used a different theory now. Remember there, I used 3 concepts. But for me to be able to do justice to this topic, I used the socio-ecological model of care, okay? Because it shows that care is not just health, care is holistic. Then I had my new theory. What about my methodology? Now, my methodology here, I had to be very open that part of this was part of a bigger study of my master's thesis. You have to be open about that because some of the findings you're using are from that study, okay? So we adopted a qualitative, we positioned them as speaking subjects. Tape recording, field notes were transcribed, we adhered to. So it's the same methodology with everything. We obtained ethical clearance from the national, you see, all that is coming in. That's all what I did for my master's, data analysis. Frame to counter assumptions, for example. Okay, so I think, let me look for the place where it says, you see here in the acknowledgement, see, it's Aurelia Munene was responsible for developing the research design. So in this particular publication, we have to show who did what. Because sometimes older researchers may appropriate work of younger researchers. So you see, it's very clear, and data collection under the supervision of AUMA, and the paper was written collaboratively. So this, I think in the cover letter, we had to say that this paper the largest study was a master study, but I would encourage you to put that under the methodology so that someone can know that this is just a portion of a bigger study. Then you can see, if you can see well, there is a new, like it's not the same subtopics you are seeing there. You see, now I had to talk about selectivity, segmentation within education and policy. I had to talk about selectivity and segmentation within health policy. So these were new literature I had to read to align to the title that I had chosen. And then I had some of the accounts. Some of these I got it from my master's thesis, the findings, but I did not copy paste them. I rewrote them, I read them anew, I looked for new literature so that it can be fresh and new. And then, so you can see the study actually, it is my master's study, but this paper is an enriched version of a particular objective or a particular question. Then the conclusions. Then I drew my conclusions and made that case. So what are the tips when it comes to picking a paper, carving out a particular paper from a big paper? One, for you to publish, you have to have a ready thesis. You have to have a ready research which has findings and all that, so that you can be able to publish the findings, especially for you who are doing it for school. Number two, you need to read your paper, find out what area would you like to publish on. Go look for a journal that is peer-reviewed, that is a good journal, that is not predatory, where you can publish that. And then these days we even have opportunities for preprints, and I think we will call Africa Archives to talk a bit about preprints, where you can get peer review of your paper before it goes for publication. And then once you have identified the journal, you now start writing your paper. Remember, you have to align your paper to the journal and also to the topic that you have chosen. So be ready to read again. Be ready to beef up your findings with reading. Don't copy paste your work. Go look at it, talk about the findings. Make sure your work has logic. You don't want bits and pieces of your master's or PhD thesis in the publication and then they're not making sense. There has to be flow. So from that master's paper you've seen, I published 4 publications, a book chapter with Routledge. I was also cited another journal, and all of them, when you read them, they are citing the masters, but they are new papers as well. I'm using those findings and beefing up the findings. I remember one of them, I was writing about men and childcare, and I went and collected a bit more data on men because it didn't come out strongly in my master's. So I just said in my methodology, the bigger study had talked to 2 or 3 men, but I went and added a few more narratives. And also because time had gone, I wanted to, it was 3 or 4 years later, I wanted some new perspective. So you can also add a bit of study participants. So this week, the homework, for those who now want to, who have already, their research is ready, go and identify what you want to publish on, read through your paper nicely, try and see, I'm going to do this objective, and maybe these are the findings I'm going to bring out. And then now on Friday, we will then discuss how to now get a potential journal. I'm going to share a link on how to get a journal. So you're going to use that so that on Friday we can see what journals you've got that are potential for your publication. Each of us will present so that we can see, and then we can see if they're good journals. And then you can now be on your way to start writing. So thank you very much for listening to me. This week has been very heavy. I'm working on a report. That's why I've not released the curriculum yet, but please bear with me. I'm balancing a lot of things at this moment. So do the homework, go and identify something that you will publish, and then within the week, start looking for 2 or 3 journals you'd like to publish in. I'm going to share the link on how to look for a journal. So as I said, you can publish. These days I don't struggle to publish, maybe to struggle to have time to write. But once I write, even last year for my PhD, I'm doing another master's now, but for my PhD, I've already written the proposal. It is ready. I've read around it. So it's once you start doing it, it's not difficult. And now because I work as a consultant, it also helps me because I'm always in the mood of writing. So I wish you well. Take care. God bless. And yes, we can do this.